Hey Team Bio, welcome to a screencast that's revisiting our introduction to water and introducing some new terms that also have to do with what we already learned about water. So just a brief reminder that we're exploring the relationship between structure and function and how the structure of something informs its function. And we've talked about the structure of water and the fact that it is a polar molecule, meaning one side of it is slightly positive and the other side is slightly negative. And we get this effect because oxygen is more electronegative than hydrogen. And so it pulls on these electrons that it's sharing in the covalent bond a little bit more strongly than the hydrogen does because it has more protons in its nucleus. And as a result, we get a side of the molecule that's negatively charged and a side of the molecule that is positively charged. This is in contrast to methane, which is a nonpolar molecule. It has a bunch of carbon-hydrogen bonds. Carbon is a little bit more electronegative than hydrogen, but not enough to pull on these electrons so that it creates a dipole within the molecule, meaning that distribution of charge. So this is a neutral molecule, and this is a dipole, charged molecule on either side. Okay, so this gives water its very cool property of the ability to form hydrogen bonds. And we see this when we get multiple water molecules together. This is an example of an intermolecular force or an intermolecular bond because it's between different water molecules. The slightly negative oxygen is going to bond briefly with the slightly positive hydrogen. So we get this interaction between the molecules, this force holding them together, and this is called a hydrogen bond. Okay, so hydrogen bonds can form between two water molecules, as pictured here. This is called cohesion. So cohesion is when water bonds with water. The co part meaning that it's water bonding to other water. Okay, this is in contrast to adhesion, which is water. Oh, and I guess I should state in here, sorry if you're doing this with a pencil, water is hydrogen bonding, H bonds. So water H bonding, sorry all of you doing this with pencils. Ooh, bummer. Okay, water H bonding with water, and adhesion is water H bonding with not water, other polar molecules. So cohesion is with when water hydrogen bonds with other water molecules, and adhesion is when water bonds with other polar molecules that are not water. And this is a super important property when we're talking about the chemistry of life because it gives water this ability to do a bunch of different things. Is not a great descriptive word, but it allows water to perform a bunch of different tasks, I guess. That's also not a great description. It allows water to do a wide variety of things, and we'll talk about them here. The first thing it allows water to do is be a very good solvent for polar things. So check it out. We have a salt crystal here. Salt is composed of chlorine and sodium, or chloride and sodium. And water is a great solvent for salts because it's able to support the ions. Remember, an ion is a charged atom. It's able to support these ions in solution. So we have when Sodium and chloride split apart. The chloride has a negative charge on it as one extra electron, and the sodium is missing an electron as one more proton than electrons. So the sodium ions are able to be surrounded by the negatively charged part of water, and the chlorides are able to be surrounded by the positively charged parts of water. So you can notice here all the oxygens are all next to sodium because they are slightly negatively charged, and all the hydrogens are next to the chloride because they're all positively charged. So water is able to support ions in solution really well. So water is an excellent solvent. So this would be an example of adhesion, water bonding to not water, other things. Okay, another fantastic example of what water is able to do because of cohesion and adhesion is have a high surface tension. So here we have an example of a little water glider. No, this is a spider. Spider walking on water. This is kind of a beautiful picture. It looks kind of velvety, but this is actually water. And the reason why the spider is able to walk on top of the water is because these water molecules that are down inside the water here are very strongly bonded to one another because of this hydrogen bonding. So we have a whole network, a whole web, if you will, of water molecules bonded to one another inside of this water that's creating this really high surface tension. So this is an example of cohesion. Okay, and then last, we have capillarity, which is an example of cohesion and adhesion. So if you ever have wondered, how does water get from the roots of a tree up to the leaves? Here's the answer. It has to do with this property of water called capillarity. You might have heard of a capillary before in your body. It's a tiny little tube that's allowing blood to flow through it, and capillaries are what's connecting your arteries to your veins. So they're tiny little tubes in your body, and a tree also has tiny little capillaries, little microscopic water conducting tubes called the xylem. And water is able to move up the tree because of both cohesion and adhesion. So these tiny little microscopic water conducting tubes are polar. And this means that water molecules will bind to the sides of the tube. This is an example of adhesion. They'll also bond to other water molecules. This is an example of cohesion. And they can slowly progress up the tube because they form a bond with the wall of the tube, and then they form a bond with the water molecule above, and they're pulled up, and then they form another bond to the side of the tube, and then they form another bond up, and so they're brought boop, 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 up the tube by this cohesive and adhesive forces between the molecules. Another example of when you can see this happen in your everyday life is if you've ever dipped a piece of paper towel into water, you'll notice that the paper towel gets wet above where you dip it in the water. This is because water's climbing up the paper towel. In tiny little kind of micropores in the paper towel, you get these adhesive forces where the water bonds to the paper towel, and then the cohesive forces where the water molecules bind to each other and they drag each other up. So capillarity is an example of cohesion and adhesion, and it pulls water up from the roots of trees all the way to the very tippity top in the leaves, which could be hundreds of feet up, which is quite impressive. Okay, so that's it. We're going to be creating water demos in class showing these different properties of water as a solvent, the surface tension of water, and capillarity in the next week or two. So keep this at the back of your mind and be ready to bring it forth when you need to. Okay, that's all.